For the 3 people, including myself, that are pulling for Emilie despite Notlin being on the horizon, let's get this out of the way. Emilie is not a character that builds full EM and does a ton of burn damage. She's not a Nilou or Chevreuse type character that provides meaningful changes or debuffs that benefit burn damage. Instead, she relies on the burn reaction to constantly be present for insane buffs to her personal Dendro damage. Let me show you what I mean. Her elemental skill places a lamp down on the ground to attack a nearby enemy every 1.5 seconds, and by itself its damage multiplier is absolutely pitiful. But once an enemy has burned for 4 seconds in the lamp's presence, the lamp will gain 2 stacks of what the game calls sense and will level up to level 2, in which its damage multiplier will more than double, and every time it launches an attack it deals damage twice. That means you're dealing over 4 times the damage with Emilie's skill when you play around the burning reaction, and it also means that Emilie is basically unplayable without the burning reaction. Not only are you missing out on 4 times the base damage without burning, but you also miss out on both of her Ascension passives, which grant her up to 36% extra damage bonus to opponents affected by burning, and extra hits from her lamp that are independent of its regular 1.5 second interval. And last but not least, Emilie's Elemental Burst is a level 3 version of her elemental skill where for a brief 2.8 seconds, her lamp rains down Dendro hits onto enemies before the lamp returns back to its normal form with its duration refreshed. Because her burst has a 13.5 second cooldown while the lamp from her elemental skill lasts on the field for 22 seconds, that means you technically never have to press Emilie's elemental skill after the first time you place her skill down. Assuming you have enough energy to burst every rotation, you can simply swap in, press your burst, and then swap back out to have a refreshed duration on her skill's uptime. Not only is this burst fantastic for keeping Emilie's field time extremely short, it's also her sole source of reliable AoE damage, which means most players would like to use Emilie's burst every rotation, even if it's not mandatory for her skill's uptime, since her skill also has a cooldown that's shorter than the 22-second uptime. Despite her burst only costing 50 energy, her elemental skill's lamp will only generate 1 Dendro particle every other hit. So in order to burst as often as possible, energy recharge is not a stat that you can always ignore on Emilie, as we'll see in the artifact section. If there's one thing that Hoyoverse did right with Emilie, it's definitely making their new artifact set Unfinished Reverie relevant. The 4-set Unfinished Reverie grants 18% attack on its 2-set bonus and essentially gives a permanent 50% damage bonus to all sources of damage for Emilie, assuming you're playing her in the right teams and getting good burning uptime. That's great and all, but another option you can run on Emilie is the 4-set Deepwood Memories, because 15% Dendro damage bonus and 30% Dendro Res Shred is also a very powerful boost to Emilie's damage. When comparing Unfinished Reverie and Deepwood Memories on Emilie, Deepwood is only 3 to 4% behind Reverie, assuming that with the 4-set Unfinished Reverie, you do not have a teammate applying Dendro Res Shred. That means the benefit of Unfinished Reverie is that it has a high DPS ceiling when you're able to run another Dendro character with the 4-set Deepwood with Emilie, while its con is that its domain also has the niche Bond of Life set, making it pretty resin inefficient to farm if you're not a Clorind or Arlecchino owner. Meanwhile, Deepwood Memories' biggest strengths are that it provides a high DPS floor that can almost match the 4-set Unfinished Reverie, and its domain is very resin efficient to farm with Gilded Dreams as the other set. Other temporary set bonuses that you can run on Emilie include a 2-set Deepwood plus a 2-set attack percent, or the 4-set Golden Troop. However, these sets perform significantly worse on Emilie, and you should always try to finish your Emilie build with one of the first 2 options that we discussed. For artifact stats, as I hinted at the start of the video, Emilie does not build full EM, and instead builds the standard DPS build of attack percent in the Sands, Dendro damage bonus in the Goblet, and crit rate or crit damage in the Circlet. Substat priority will be crit stats, energy recharge, attack, and EM in that order of priority. Emilie's energy requirements for using her burst every rotation depends on whether or not you have her signature weapon. If you don't have her signature weapon, I highly recommend 160% energy recharge through weapon main stats and substats if she's paired with another Dendro character, or even 180% in cases where she's a solo Dendro. You can run an energy recharge Sands on Emilie instead of an attack Sands to nullify the need for more than just a few ER substat rolls, and then just focus a ton of attack percent in substats instead, and whichever way you go works fine. With their signature weapon, Emilie gains a consistent source of 12 flat energy that can easily cut her energy requirements to around the 130 to 140% range. And as you just saw in the artifact section, Emilie's signature weapon is already really good if we just look at the energy that it gives on its passive. Unfortunately, if you add the 33.1% crit rate main stat and the extra attack percent plus damage bonus against burning enemies on its passive, this weapon surpasses all other options by a long shot. The reason why this is unfortunate instead of fortunate is because we're in the patch right before Notlin, and many Emilie players will be torn on whether or not to pull for her weapon or save for the new Notlin characters. Despite how good the signature weapon is, my advice is, unless you're a die-hard Emilie fan, you can skip this polearm since chances are new characters will be more fun in the long run. Emilie also has a ton of great substitute options beyond her signature in both the 5-star and 4-star pool of polearms. Beyond Emilie's signature, the next best option is surprisingly Shenhe's signature weapon, Calamity Queller. Although it's quite a rare weapon, its passive effect is perfect for Emilie's playstyle, granting her a ridiculous amount of attack percent that stacks as she spends time off field, as long as you make sure to use her skill every rotation to trigger the passive effect. Options slightly below Calamity Queller include Staff of Homa, Staff of Scarlet Sands, and Engulfing Lightning, which are all mainly used for their stats and have decent passives for Emilie at best. An R5 deathmatch will be your best 4-star option for pure damage, and its damage output is very comparable to the level of some of the other 5-star stat stick polearms that I just mentioned. However, if you take a look at Emilie from a holistic perspective and not just pure damage, some may consider an R5 Favonius Lance to be her best option instead. Not only does the energy recharge and energy focus passive really ease up Emilie's need for ER in artifact substats, but it has a high base attack, and its passive also benefits any teammates that have energy problems as well. Many players won't have access to an R5 deathmatch, let alone one copy of the weapon, because it's a battle pass weapon. If that sounds like you, then look no further than Favonius Lance, which gets exponentially better with each refinement. Other free-to-play 4-star options to consider include the Missive Wind Spear if you were around during the early Sumeru patches to claim this event weapon, or the Catch, which is like Favonius Lance minus the benefits it gives to your teammates. When it comes to team building with Emilie, she's more of a unit that's plug and play wherever you're building around the Pyro element. Her biggest weakness is that she's not very good at what your traditional Dendro characters do. For spread damage in quicken teams, her multipliers are absolutely pitiful in the absence of burning, and you're better off sticking to Alhaitham or Tighnari for pure quicken teams. For Dendro application, while her burst is nice for quick AoE Dendro application, her skill barely has any AoE and only applies Dendro every other hit, meaning she loses out to popular options like Dendro MC and Nahida. However, what she lacks in Dendro application is where she shines in raw Dendro damage paired with Pyro application, as crazy as that sounds. Burning is a reaction that does insignificant damage outside of Nahida's burning thanks to the way her skill works, and is more often looked at as a clever way to keep the Pyro element on enemies. In fact, one of Emilie's better teams is the Burn Melt archetype with Riesli or Ganyu paired with Emilie. For melee Burn Melt teams, one of the biggest issues is survivability due to how much burning damage you can take if you stand right next to a burning enemy for too long. Fortunately, Emilie's extra passive talent grants the entire party 85% burning res whenever her skill is on the field, making her a prime candidate for Riesli, specifically because he needs to keep his HP high to get consistent enhanced normal attacks. In the 3rd and 4th slots of a Burn Melt team, you usually want to pick up a Pyro unit that can apply Pyro off-field for burning, and a healer/shielder. Everyone already knows the strength of Xiangling, and as always, she is the prime candidate for applying Pyro off-field in the 3rd slot. However, should you want a substitute for Xiangling, you do have an alternate option for Riesli and an alternate option for Ganyu. Toma works well with Riesli because he's a shielder, his Pyro application is tied to your on-field character normal attacking, and his slow Pyro application rate matches Riesli's slow Cryo application rate. Deha is a decent pairing for Ganyu because she provides Pyro application and resistance to interruption, even though that resistance won't always stop your Ganyu from getting interrupted like a shield does. The only issue with Deha is that sometimes in AoE scenarios, the pairing of Deha and Emilie won't have enough elemental application to keep burning on all the enemies, because Ganyu's charge shot does apply Cryo twice, so keep that in mind. In the healer slot, Bennett is usually the most popular healer and is pretty much mandatory if you're running Xiangling due to how well he generates Pyro energy particles to feed Xiangling's Pyronado. For Riesli Burn Melt variants without a C1, you always want a healer that doesn't interfere with the burning reaction often, so Mika and Charlotte are your two best options. Just try not to use Charlotte's hold skill and burst at the same time for too much cryo application. For Ganyu Burn Melt teams, it's common to just run Zhongli or Diona to ensure she can always get her charge attacks off instead of relying on Deha who can't stop every attack. These two shielders have minimal elemental application, and they can also provide buffs to the team with Zhongli's Red Shred and Diona's EM buff on C6, but running them instead of Bennett means your Xiangling needs upwards of 250 plus energy recharge. Probably the only team that's more synergistic for Emilie than a Burn Melt team is the Mono Pyro team, but it's not really a Mono Pyro team anymore once we add in Emilie. Basically, Emilie fits so well here because she does nothing to interrupt your Pyro characters since they're not looking to trigger any specific reaction, and she also provides significant off-field damage. I don't know exactly what to call this team archetype, but usually it just consists of Emilie, Bennett, Kazuha, and your Pyro DPS. That Pyro DPS can be Arlecchino or Xiangling as your strongest options, or any other one of your favorite Pyro DPS characters from the olden days like Klee, Diluc, Yanfei, Hu Tao, Yoimiya, etc. This team pretty much has it all regardless of your Pyro DPS, given that you're pairing Bennett's heals and attack buff with Kazuha's grouping and elemental damage buffs. If you lack Kazuha, you can slot in Nahida, Dendro MC, or Kole with the 4-set Deepwood Memories. Doing so allows you to run the 4-set Unfinished Reverie on Emilie and unlock her damage ceiling that you usually can't get in any other team. The last recommended team is very much like the previous team, except you cannot choose your Pyro DPS and are stuck with Bennett and Xiangling paired with Emilie. In the last slot, we choose Farina for strong buffs to the team and also high Vaporize damage with her elemental skill. Farina is sort of that perfect storm for Emilie, Bennett, and Xiangling, where her Hydro application is slow enough to not completely overtake the Pyro and Dendro auras to prevent burning, while also getting in some Vaporize reactions as well. With this team, you can keep Emilie on the field to have her skills benefit from Bennett's burst, and you can also continually swap characters in to heal from Bennett's burst as well to generate more fanfare stacks for Farina since there is no true on-fielder in this team. This is my personal favorite team because it really is just bashing your head against the wall with some of the strongest units in the game, and it doesn't require that perfect thinking, perfect gameplay, or delicate setup that something like a Burn Melt team would need. If you want an on-fielder for Vaporize with Emilie, you can most likely swap Farina for Neuvillette in this team. However, I am not 100% certain that this will work since the test server had C6 Neuvillette and I couldn't test whether or not a non-C6 Neuvillette would overtake the Pyro and Dendro application from Xiangling and Emilie. From my testing with C6 Neuvillette, it seemed like his Hydro application was just barely over the limit, so I'm willing to bet that a C0 to C5 Neuvillette would do just fine for the most part. You can try to run other team archetypes like a Burgeon team with Emilie, but I'm not going to recommend it in this video because Burning and Burgeon are two conflicting reactions. Normal Burgeon teams usually try to minimize the burning reaction to ensure Dendro cores can be produced, but if you try to emphasize burning for the sake of Emilie, then you'll end up with much less Burgeon reactions. Emilie can support several Pyro, Cryo, and Hydro DPS characters with burning, so hopefully you found a nice team outside of Burgeon. But with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this Emilie build guide, and most importantly, I hope this guide was helpful for building the perfect Emilie for your account. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.